Streams are for you. We're doing these for community, so we'd love to hear. Let us know how we're doing. Please send me an email. I'm Rick at BrandStorytelling.tv. You have suggestions on future streams or ones that you may even want to participate in, or just want to let us know how we're doing. We need to hear from you. So we're here to serve. So please help us do the best we can. When people ask me, well, what is this brand storytelling thing? I often point out to them that, it turns out that people would rather be entertained and informed than interrupted. Then, they continue to scratch their heads about what this is. I suggest they go watch some films. I point them to the great McGilvery-Freeman IMAX films. Go watch any of those that are funded by Expedia and the Brand USA and United Airlines. Go watch the great Dick's Sporting Goods film, We Could Be King. There's so many things to watch, but most recently, I've been pointing people to the award-winning films 5B by Johnson & Johnson and Gay Chorus Deep South by Airbnb. We're really fortunate to have the director of Gay Chorus Deep South here with us today, the producer of 5B, and this great discussion about brands and documentary filmmaking, hosted by my friend Brian Newman, the founder and CEO of Subgenre. Brian is our resident independent film expert. He's been the CEO of Tribeca Films. He's consulted with many brands on their brand documentary films, including REI, Yeti, IBM, and many others. So Brian, really happy to have you here today. This is going to be a great discussion. I turn the screen over to you, my friend.
Thanks, Rick, and thanks to Andrew behind the scenes and everyone at Brand Storytelling. Rick, I just can't thank you enough for everything you've been doing during this time, putting these together. I've been joining them as an attendee. I've been on one, and I'm really happy to be here today. Thanks so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Brian. Take it away.
Yeah, so everyone can start joining us. I'll make introductions as the screens are getting turned on by our panelists here. We all know, as Rick just mentioned, several brands have already made documentaries. But recently with COVID, we've seen a dramatic increase in cord cutting. By some reports, as much as 43% increase in cord cutting just in the last couple months. And there's been, of course, the rise in streaming and in the SVOD players. And so the premise of this panel, which we'll get into very quickly here, is now the perfect time for brands to embrace this trend. I'd like to introduce our panelists. I'm going to go in the order I'm seeing them, but I know everyone sees them in a different order. We have David Charles Rodriguez, who's the filmmaker and creative director. He was the director of the critically acclaimed Gay Chorus Deep South, which was Airbnb's first feature and was purchased by MTV. We also have with us, and David, maybe you can raise your hand so people know which one's you if they don't see your name there. We have Rupert McConnick with us, who's the founder and executive producer from Seville Productions. He was the producer of 5B for Johnson & Johnson, which was distributed for Verizon, and may be the first film to play both Cannes Lions and the Cannes Film Festival, so both sides there. And also, lo and behold, for NetScout and distributed by Magnolia, among other films. And Rupert, if you could raise your hand just so people know who you are. And Lowell Shapiro. Lowell is the founder of Black Box, an entertainment and management company, and DocBox, making documentary content for brands. So, Lowell, I'm going to throw this one to you to start, actually, and then get to everyone else. But given all this cord cutting and the rise in SVOD, as people at brands start to get back their budgets, which we know everyone is going through budget cuts as well. But why do you think now is a perfect time for us to start to embrace this trend of brands making documentary films and series?
Well, first off, I just wanted to thank you, Brian, and thank you, Rick and Andrew, for me to be talking with you guys, and also with a great filmmaker like David and Rupert as a producer. I'm such a fan of 5B, so thank you both for making those films. So my background is in entertainment management, representing different types of artists as well as documentary filmmakers, helping to package projects and sell projects into the marketplace. What we're seeing right now in streaming companies, premium cable, is a very, very healthy marketplace for unscripted content. If things lead to a writer's strike, which very well could happen in the next year or two once we get past Corona, we're really expected to see the budgets in the unscripted divisions of these streaming companies, of these premium cable companies, of these networks really starting to expand and grow, because they may not even be able to do scripted content soon. From a cultural perspective, I think everyone on this panel can really agree that we feel like we're in a golden age of documentary, where really, really exciting filmmakers are coming to the table and creating projects with unique perspectives, many times which are a lot more unique and a lot better made films than scripted counterparts. And I think that's a trend that we're going to continue to see. So in my perspective, there's a lot of opportunity for brands to really enter the marketplace, think about spending money on projects, and for the first time in history, really having a variety of distribution possibilities for those projects.
Absolutely. And David, I want to come over to you because your film, Gay Chorus South, has had quite a successful run. And I looked the other day and it looks like you're still at 100% Rotten Tomatoes. And it's clear that that's a film funded by a brand that's been doing quite well. Tell us a little bit more about what you think about why brands should embrace this trend, and a little bit about your film.
Yeah, of course. Well, what I think that, as budgets get cut and brands really need to focus on the stories they need to tell, I feel like there's a cost benefit to telling it through the documentary form. One, because oftentimes productions, I won't go into numbers right now, but productions of a documentary can cost as less or maybe the same price of a commercial. And a commercial right now, especially, if you thought media was fragmented before, now without live sports and without live events, it's even more, right? We have no idea who is watching what, and the streaming platforms are really taking over, and there's no advertising on those streaming platforms. So I feel like it would be a real cost-effective way to invest in a long form story, and to participate in that conversation through that story. I think with Gay Chorus, Airbnb already had a legacy of, supporting the LGBTQ community, but after the film, it's really solidified as probably one of the leading brands, not just for that community, but also for for people who fight for equality. Right. And the film has been in over 150 festivals worldwide. I mean, it started at Tribeca actually a little over a year ago. And, on June 7th now, we're going to be the closing night film of Outstream, which is a streaming film festival. So like, what 30-second commercial has the longevity, of being, this heavily promoted and freely promoted and freely, PR'd and distributed for over a year, and probably way over, and once it comes out on MTV, then, that will take a new life of its own. So I think I think it's a great time. I think that, brands need to, start seeing, just the same way back, when I started in advertising, digital advertising was kind of the back burner, where it was like the risk investment, and then it kind of became, the majority of the investment. And now I think that long form storytelling also deserves a place at the table, and not just, like a cool thing to do. It needs to be a necessary thing to do.
Absolutely. So a lot of good reasons there. Another thing we've been hearing a lot about in different studies and reports is that consumers want brands to be more actively involved in things like social issues, and they're really craving for brands to take a more authentic stance. So Rupert, as I throw it over to you to talk about this trend and why people should embrace it, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that notion as well.
I think it's very simple that young people particularly want to support brands that do good. There's a thing called the Brookings Report, and it basically, clearly outlines that 95% of young people want to support brands that do good. So the majority of young people won't take an Uber, but they will take a Lyft, because in some people's opinion, Lyft has a more progressive stance. And most brands have to have a progressive stance on a wide range of issues. So, J&J have been forward thinking. They have a big LGBT mandate and so on. We've done a variety of films which support social issues or sort of highlight an important thing that people have to change behavior. We did a Don't Text and Drive film with Werner Herzog with AT&T a few years ago, and it had a very powerful impact. And I think the fundamental thing here is marketing's kind of a triangle, right? So you got marketing at the top, and ads are one part of the triangle, and then branded content's another piece, social, influencers, digital, so on, are all different parts. And now actually doing sponsored entertainment, which can reach consumers on commercial-free streaming platforms, is kind of critical. And the best way of doing that is actually to do it in an authentic way. And the best way for a brand to do that is actually focus on a social issue that they feel strongly about, particularly now, if you think about it, because we're all in the middle of an environmental crisis which highlights inequalities around in America and globally. So this is the time for brands to be talking around these issues and less about themselves and more about the issues that they care about.
Right. So I agree with you, obviously, but as people are maybe working at a brand and they're trying to pitch this to their colleagues as something to do, how much does the brand show up in these films? And, where's their logo? And all those kind of questions often come up. Any one of you want to answer that?
PR. I would say if you want to do something authentically, have a look at how Hollywood does things, right? So, arguably most Hollywood films are actually promotional films to sell toys. So they do this in a very subtle way. We don't feel that we're watching a promotional film, but ultimately we are going to buy a whole wide range of products. And I think if brands can do these things authentically, then it has much more of an impact. J&J, they didn't insert themselves in the nurse film that we did, but they fully supported it. And it had, we have all the media impressions to prove that it was very successful. Netscout the same. So it's a matter of subtlety. And we have to make a great film that has a big impact, that people want to watch. And then a brand can talk about why they did that and have a huge PR impact.
And on top of what Rupert is saying, that's definitely, crucial. Another really important thing too, that I think that actually a lot of filmmakers and people that try to pitch ideas to brands often forget is really aligning the story and the story you're trying to tell to the brand values. I was very fortunate that, my background is in advertising, and I worked building brands for, almost 18 years before, getting into filmmaking. And, Airbnb's values, for example, are acceptance and the idea of belong anywhere, right? Belong, how when you travel, you kind of make prejudice personal and you kind of overcome, prejudice by traveling. And, when I saw the story of the chorus, I thought it just had a perfect alignment to Airbnb's brand values. And those values are literally spread out throughout the entire film without us even trying. We didn't force anything a single time. And, then the executives at Airbnb were really smart at not wanting to put the brand up front because they knew the bias that it could create. And then they ended up only putting an Airbnb production really subtle after the main credits. And and we were still a little bit concerned of that, but we were going to test it. And when we, it premiered at Tribeca, and when we started showing it in festivals, I actually noticed, when an Airbnb production it wasn't even a logo, it just said an Airbnb production would show up at the very end, people had a really positive, they were like, holy shit, I can't believe a brand, had the courage to deal with politics and religion and, LGBTQ rights the way it did. And I really think that that's really the thing, the brand having the courage and the boldness to tell a genuine story, just like Rupert did with 5B, is really the thing that will get brands to succeed in this space.
Absolutely. And we have one question that came over, and we won't be able to go into all the ways of doing this, but it was, how do people approach brands? And David, I want to change that a little bit and ask, was this an idea you had and brought to Airbnb, or did Airbnb come to you? And then the second part of the question would be, any quick advice on how people would approach brands with these ideas?
Yeah, well, I already had a relationship with Airbnb, working on other projects with them for over a year at that point. And I knew they had some appetite for content, not long form because they hadn't done it yet. But when I kind of shared that story internally, we all just got very excited about it, and it just kind of grew and grew and grew, and and we ended up and kind of miraculously making it. So no, it wasn't a mandate, but luckily the CMO at the time, Jonathan Mildenhall, and the managing director James Good, and the ECD Tony, they were, they had the vision to support it, because they knew that, by telling this story, it could become, not just a legacy piece for Airbnb, but also a form of, supporting the LGBT community in a new way, right? Instead of just sponsoring an event, which is something they usually did, they used some of that budget to fund a film.
And Rupert, any quick advice from you? You've worked with a lot of brands. Any advice on from the filmmakers' perspective, producers going to the brands? I want to flip it from the brands coming to filmmakers next.
I think generally brands are they're looking for people with a track record, and I think if you're a second-time filmmaker, it's probably easier. If you have a signature calling card which has done well at a film festival or has people responded to, then I think it's going to be a lot easier to open the door of brands. I don't think brands or agencies are that easy to get into, frankly. It takes quite a lot of time. And it's a lot easier if you're coming off a successful film, whether it's your first documentary, it's got into Tribeca and it's done well, then you have a better opportunity to get in with a brand who may share the values of what your film's about. I also think it's important that, people make a film which has, a specific message and supports a specific community. Then one can then target brands who have those same values. To David's point, which I think is very appropriate, most brands have marketing pillars. And the first thing that we do is when we start talking to them is saying, what are your marketing pillars? What do you want to see happen as a result of this? What group do you want to celebrate? And we get quite linear about that. And then our goal is to try and find a really powerful human story. So I think, realistically, trying to walk into a brand without, a show reel or a calling card is pretty tough. I think one has to create a low budget doc that does well at film festivals and then go and talk to them.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think one of your key points there for brands thinking about doing this too is that it has to be very true to their brand pillars and their mission, as you were talking about, but also be a story that people would want to show up and see. When a brand's thinking about doing this, oftentimes what I found is they don't know where to start. And sometimes they might go to their ad agency, or they might just go to someone they've already got a relationship with. But Lowell, this is something you do quite often, is help introduce people to directors. Yeah. So I was thinking maybe you could give us a little bit of some feedback on the best way brands who are thinking of moving into this could approach good directors. Do they want to do this, and how does that work?
I think it's quite simple. I mean, look, I think we're living in an age today where the quality of the filmmakers working in this space is just so high. And in many ways, this period of content is really reflective, director-wise, of like the mid 90s, the Miramax films, the Paul Thomas Anderson films, the Wes Anderson films, these inventive directors that were coming out of that time period and that age in the indie film scene. Now it feels like those types of voices are now being represented in documentary filmmaking. And I think it's as simple as, because there's so much documentary content out there, as a brand, which documentaries have you seen that you like? You know, who are the filmmakers out there telling stories that you're intrigued by? Because there's a pretty good chance that all of these filmmakers, you know, even if they do a story, a sports story about LeBron James, they oftentimes could have, you know, 10 other ideas that they've kind of conjured together that are in various stages of development that very well could speak to a brand. So I think the first part is really identifying work that you yourself are a fan of. What do you connect to when you watch? And then if you're fans of those filmmakers, how do we have conversations about how those people can create things that will then help you do your job at your company?
Yeah, and I want to get a little bit more into this process part real quickly. We have a lot to cover in a short period of time, but either Rupert or David, either one, what's usually the process for how this works? And speak a little bit to issues like creative control. That always comes up, both from the brand's perspective and the producer's perspectives.
We always encourage a development process. So one of the things that we've been doing is we always ask the brand, all right, as an example, J&J, they said, we presented the idea of doing a documentary around, you know, nurse heroes. And they said, great, well, what is it? And we said, well, look, fundamentally, we need a development process. So they gave us roughly 10% of the budget. We brought in a very large team of documentary researchers, and we literally spent 2 months just looking for nurse hero stories, because we wanted to find a completely unusual story that had never been told. We didn't want to do a sort of generic survey doc of a nurse sort of shooting a nurse at an earthquake and so on. We wanted to find a really powerful story around something which hadn't been told before. And that takes a lot of digging. And, you know, ultimately you're competing against a lot of very good development people in Hollywood. So we have to do something better than what they're doing. So we always encourage a development process. And then, you know, at some point through that development process, we'll bring in a director who's appropriate for the story, and we'll present a couple of options and then see who everyone feels comfortable with. In terms of director's control, you know, and how it all works, generally we recommend, you know, letting everyone go a little bit. So we do encourage that the director gets editorial control and gets final cut, because ultimately, if you're making a film, it says a Werner Herzog film or a Dan Krause film or a whoever, you know, David Charles film. And I think you need to be in a position where it feels authentic. And we found actually once we have that conversation, everyone lets go, and we actually end up with a much better result because everyone feels empowered and they don't feel micromanaged.
Yeah, and David, anything you want to add to that? And just a housekeeping real quick for the other panelists in between, if you could make sure to mute your microphones, thanks.
Yeah, I think what was so unique about our experience making Gay Chorus is, you know, me and our producer, Bud Johnston, we basically leveraged Airbnb's in-house creative team to make the film. So Adam Hobbs, their in-house, you know, director of photography, who's super talented, and Freddie, who did sound and all these other things on the film. So our team was very small, and, you know, and it was all developed and conceived and done within the walls of Airbnb. So it was a very unique case. You know, they did give me, you know, then we brought the edit to LA, and they did give me creative control. Well, I didn't have like an official final cut, but I think that my vision was so clearly communicated up front and along the way that there were no surprises. There was nothing that, you know, really became an issue when we showed them an assembly, right? So there weren't any, you know, there were minimal notes. There were just more creative editorial notes, but nothing extreme. My biggest concern, to be honest, was, you know, there's a lot of combative, you know, religion is a big theme of the film. And I thought that, you know, any brand would shy away from that. And if that happened, you know, we would have been screwed. And I was really nervous. That was the only thing I was, you know, secretly nervous about. But they didn't, they really embraced it. They understood what it did for the story, and it paid off for them big time, to be able to understand that, for me, like whenever I start any project, I say, the boss, the CEO of the project is the best story, right? And whatever is able to tell that best story, you have to respect it. And Airbnb did, I owe them a lot for that.
Yeah, that's such a key point, is at the end of the day, you've got to make the best movie. And so that's a really important point. We touched on logos a minute ago, but just in general, like as a question that's come up again in the Q&A, what do you guys usually tell brands in terms of how their logo might show up, or why they shouldn't be, product placement throughout the film? Can you talk to those just a little bit quickly? Rupert, maybe.
Sure. We basically say we ask them to put themselves in the shoes of the viewer, and say that we're trying to make an authentic doc. What will the viewer's response be to that? And generally, everyone's pretty savvy and realizes that a light fingerprint, or a light touch is much better than a heavy-handed one. And there are certain stories which automatically a brand's integrated into that story. There are other stories where it feels very forced. So what we do is part of the development process. We really have an honest conversation about everything. We also generally, when we do our films, we try and encourage everyone not to take any and no one put any logos up front. So we do all our credits towards the end. So it's the doc that stands up. And whether you have a logo in a film or not doesn't really, really help you brand something so much. It's actually the PR that helps brand you much more effectively, because it's a much more authentic process. So what we found is look, make a great film, get it into film festivals, sell it, get a really good premiere, and then get great reviews. And then once you've got great reviews, PR the hell out of it, the fact that you got involved, but wait until you've got a success before you start, promoting yourselves. That's what we say.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's all the things you can do around the film. I will say, though, just for the record, I've worked with multiple brands where their logo is in the front. Patagonia presents, REI presents, and no film festivals or distributors have ended up having a problem with that. So there's different ways to approach it. One question that came up in the Q&A, and I think it applies to both Rupert and David, your films premiered at Sundance, Tribeca, Cannes Film Festival, really premier film festivals. How important is the film festival to the life of these films? And what do they think about films made by brands? How has that worked for you?
Well, I can, I'm sure Rupert has, way more experience than I do, but, Tribeca was crucial. It was fundamental for the success of the film. They really put a spotlight on the film. They had no issues, with it. Actually, in fact, they actually, were really excited about, brands investing in this type of content. I think, the way we did it, though, I think it was important for people to see the film first and then understand that it was, financed by a brand, because it actually reverses expectation. When you see a film that, is so human and genuine and, and doesn't try to push any brand agenda, and then you see it financed by a brand, you actually end up loving that brand even much more than if they had a heavy hand in it. And it's, I think it's the quality of the film. We were lucky that we weren't even, we were put in the main competition of the festival. We were not in the, because Tribeca, as you know very well, has a big branded side to it. We didn't even participate in that. We actually didn't participate in any brand related festival or anything. The only thing we did is we just entered it in Cannes, which got canceled this year, the Cannes Lions. But we've never gotten written up in any industry trade, or it was all entertainment. And it was just a decision that we made. And I'm happy about it.
That's great. And Rupert, how about yourself? I know your films have premiered at festivals. Could you also add to the answering, though? I believe those were also part of the selling process for your film, right?
Yeah, I think, I mean, fundamentally what we're doing is we're turning marketing dollars into a product, which is a featured doc that we can sell. And if we can sell it, whoever buys it has got a vested interest to push it out there so they can get their money back. And film festivals are film markets, as you know, most people know. So our goal is always to try and make a great film, obviously, that gets into these film festivals, which are hugely competitive. And there's two simple reasons. If we get them into festivals, where those particularly high profile ones, we've increased our chances of selling them for quite a lot of money, to a huge extent. And secondly, you get a huge amount of press. And the more press we can generate, the more great reviews, the more likely the distributors are going to want to push it or buy it, and the more likely you're going to build an audience. So we all look at, you know, Rotten Tomatoes and choose films from that. You know, it's a pretty standard thing that everyone does. You look at something on Netflix, you go, let me just see what the reviews are. So obviously, you can get great reviews. That drives the audience. That drives your impressions and all of that stuff. So fundamentally, it is a key part of the process. And I have to say, I was really impressed with what David did with his film, because I'm on his Instagram, and every week, him and his team, I mean, they did a brilliant job of promoting that. And it's a great doc. So they started with Tribeca, and then they were at just every single LGBT event for the next year. And David had some fabulous outfits, which I was also quite impressed with. And he did a really good job, and they did a great job of just people wanting to see that. And you did feel good about Airbnb as a result of that, you know?
Absolutely.
I would just, Ryan,
Oh,
sorry,
please,
I would just add really quickly, you know, I think the great thing about this conversation happening in 2020 is also, I agree with everything Rupert and David are saying about the importance of the festivals. But we now live in an age where, regardless of if your film gets into a festival, there still is the opportunity for the film to be distributed to a major streaming platform. You might not get the push from the platform that you want, and that might fall more on your end as the brand to help promote it. But as far as finding distribution, it's easier than ever to get it out there.
I was about ready to come to you with a little bit about kind of that aspect, the market for these films. And right now we all know, and there's a lot of other panels and other parts of my world going on about this, that film festivals are canceling and not taking place, or switching to being online and virtual events. So it's a topsy-turvy time period. But there's also the marketplace where people package series and feature docs both. And Lowell, we were talking yesterday a little bit about that. I was thinking it would be great for you to elaborate a little bit more about how SVOD streamers can work in that way.
Sure. Well, it's important to remember, so I come to the table with a prism of the entertainment business. So a lot of what I do on a daily basis is working within that system. Right now, what I'll call the documentary business is really starting to reflect the feature film business and the scripted TV business in terms of this word called packaging, where multiple elements are coming together to create value, greater value together than they create separately, and being taken out into the marketplace. So usually those elements include a director like David, a production company like Rupert, you know, potentially someone who's worked with the streaming companies before, or the premium cable companies have a track record that they're going to deliver something great, and a piece of talent. And that piece of talent, it could be a brand, it could be an athlete, it could be a celebrity, it could be a social cause, it could be anything. But when you take those three elements together and you take them out to the marketplace, there's more incentive for these companies to buy and be in business with you. And so I think for brands, there's a real opportunity to get into projects that, quite frankly, they're not necessarily, they may be looking for your money to be spent on them, or they might just be looking for some sort of partnership as part of this greater package to then take out to the marketplace.
Yeah, I've definitely had clients where the conversation quickly becomes one where the streamer, like a Netflix, is actually fine putting up a lot of the tab, and they want the marketing prowess of the brand. So I think it works a bunch of different ways. But one of the questions that came up in the Q&A here is that we've been talking a lot about the value of impressions and PR for the brand's investment in terms of marketing alternatives. And that's obviously an important, valuable piece as well. But what about direct revenues back? Can brands be like an investor that gets paid back? And can these films either sell on the marketplace, like at a film festival, and make money back for the brands, and or be packaged in such a way that maybe the brand isn't having to put up as much money? Real quick answers from any or all of you.
Yeah, I mean, oh, sorry.
We'll start with David and then go back to Lowell.
Yeah, go ahead,
And then
Sure. Well, I mean, Gay Chorus sold to Viacom, through MTV, and it basically paid Airbnb back, for its investment. And then on top of that, then there's the investment that Viacom does by doing an Oscar campaign, theatrical release, all the other things are basically, taking over the marketing and investing in it, and all of that return on investment for Airbnb ultimately.
And Lowell, real quick, and then Rupert.
Well, I was also going to say, I think we also have to consider documentaries not necessarily just being about social good, but could be just for pure entertainment value as well. And, if you were a brand and you saw a, 21-year-old pop singer that you thought was great, and you said, I want to make a documentary about her because she's really emerging. Well, that film was made with Billie Eilish and it's sold to Apple for $25 million. So, and that was $1 million investment. Now, maybe there's difficulty getting involved with the record label, or they have the idea before a brand did, but there's a lot of Billie Eilishes out there, people on that level in many different forms of life and careers. And so I think there's a lot of untapped potential there.
A lot of win-win for everyone involved. Rupert, real quickly, you've had some experience with this, and then I want to ask another question from the audience.
We're always big believers in under-promising what we can sell these things for, because I think you can sell a doc for nothing, or up to $25 million. But what I've learned is it's very important to under-promise and hopefully over-deliver. So whatever we do has to be good. And it's like a movie. People turn around and say, well, how much are we going to make our movie for? Or you make an ad and someone says, how many media impressions have got to be? Fundamentally, it's got to be good. And I think that's kind of the key to the whole thing. And that it is very hard to deliver a really good feature doc. And you do need people, you do need directors with unique skills to be able to do that. And it's not something that people just fall into. It's something that does take quite a long time to learn how to make really good docs. So I think the thing there is, we're on our fourth one that we've sold and pretty much recouped most of the money. And they've got to be good. You've got to find the right directors and the right partners, and you've got to find the right story that's going to be powerful enough. So in terms of revenue and revenue stream, it's down to a unique story that's really good. And then, you can make money or recoup part of your investment.
Absolutely. So we've only got about 5 minutes left. And one of the questions that came up, I think, is really important. So I'd like to maybe let us close out with our thoughts on this, which is, what's everyone's sense right now of the marketplace for documentaries, specifically given COVID, and the near-term shift, with festivals going digital, and things changing in the way that films go out to the marketplace. And we all know that docs take a long time to make and then go out to that marketplace. So it's a multifaceted question, but how do you recommend that brands approach this current time period specifically that we're going through with COVID, and the different dynamics with reaching an audience? Lowell, I'll start with you and then jump into whoever.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I'm just reading the question myself. Do you want to take it, Rupert, first, and then I'll dive in?
Rupert?
I think fundamentally, here's what, it circles back to what I said at the beginning. Everyone's in marketing's read the Ogilvy book. The brand has to be the hero. But truthfully, what the audience is interested in has to be the hero, or they won't watch it, or they might hate it. So there's all these YouTube clips at the moment of people making fun of all these brand messages, home, people, family, all this stuff. They all do the same thing. But what I think people have to do is just really look at this and do authentic things and not necessarily co-opt a horrible crisis to sell your stuff. So maybe you want to, celebrate some unsung heroes, but not really make it about your brand doing that. And I think there has been some pretty cheesy examples. I've seen some car companies going, hey, you can buy one of our cars virtually and we won't charge you large amounts of money for at least a year. And you're like, oh my God, did you really think that was a good idea? So I think the thing now is in many ways, brands need to be a little bit more subtle, and they need to think about what an audience would care about, and whoever you're working with, it has to be authentic to the messages. So, I wouldn't do Shell actually approached us to make a climate change doc. And we said, that's probably not a good idea. We backed out. But, you've got to, it has to be authentic to the brand. So if the brand has to be doing something in a good way, and then you can back it up with an authentic story, or it will horribly backfire.
You just answered one of the other questions someone had asked about being approached by a brand you might not want to work with. And then also bring up a great point in the authenticity. I want to go to Lowell with his answer for that, as well as, and then we'll close on David after Lowell.
Well, I was going to first say, just going back to the initial question, there's a tremendous demand from the distributors right now. So it's a really great time. I think we're seeing—
They need product, right?
They need product, and we're seeing a trend. Because of that, we're seeing two things happen. We're seeing timelines be expedited. So I have a client directing a part of a 10-episode series for HBO Max, 1 hour documentaries each, 10 episodes. They started 2 weeks ago. They have to deliver in October, and it's going live in December. That's 10 hours of content. That's quite a lot. So we're seeing that move up, and then we're also seeing just a lot of archival driven projects like 5B that Rupert did, that can go into production now. People can start working on them, and they can get the interviews down the line however they need to.
Yeah, a lot of development happening too. And also, by the way, a rise in a lot of animation. That's another panel perhaps. David, we've got 1 minute left, so I'm gonna let you give the last answer here.
I mean, if you just look at, the two biggest hits of, this stay-at-home time are Tiger King and The Last Dance. And I think that, proves, the power that documentaries have right now. I do have to say that I feel like brands they need to get more involved and more interested, like when Gay Chorus came out, for example, within the year, I had, all the, important people in the streaming and documentary world reach out to me, including Rupert and Lowell. Not a single agency or brand reached out, wanting to talk about or interested or wanting to do something new, and I just feel like they're still disconnected, they're still disconnected from what's going on.
Well, hopefully this will help bring some more people to the table because we know it's an exciting marketplace right now, and people are stuck at home and wanting to watch these films, especially if they're a little bit more on the entertaining side, which I think most brands like as well. So we could talk about this much longer, but we can't because we're out of time. I'm going to toss it back over to our host, Rick Parkhill. But thank you everyone for joining us on this panel. Congrats on your films as well and everything you'll be doing in this new marketplace too. Rick?
Yeah, hey, thank you. We're going to have to figure out a virtual hand clap so all of you guys can hear the appreciation from our audience. We're used to doing live events and having a nice round of ovation afterwards. I really enjoyed this 45 minutes myself, guys. I hope you'll come back. I thank you for your films. Gosh, it's terrific work that you're all doing, all four of you. So I wish you a lot of luck going forward, and that people will share this video with brands everywhere, and that maybe this will convince more investment in brand documentaries. So thanks very much, you guys. I got to say, we have another live stream show that's going to start in about 14 minutes at 1 o'clock Pacific, 4 o'clock Eastern. It's being hosted by our friend Danielle Dardashti, and it's featuring brands from Prudential, MasterCard, Pearson, and Pfizer. So if you want to join that stream, just go to BrandStorytelling.tv, click on the stream icon at the top of the page and register for that one, and we'll see you in about 12 minutes. So, hey, thanks everybody very much.
Thank
Be
you.
safe. We'll see you soon. Thank you.